Jacksonville. The child was born who couldn't sit still. 86 years later with no regret. You know that man can't sit still yet. The Great Depression couldn't get him down. He worked for his dad's store in town, collecting money in small amounts for poor whites and blacks in their furniture accounts. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. As he'd collect, he'd talk to folks. He'd hear legends, tales, songs, and jokes. Now this fine treasure he'd record and write. He was colorblind, didn't see black and white. Writer's project for the WPA. Zora Neale Hurston, he earned his pay. Crackers and blacks, they talked for hours. It was a barefoot history in this land of flowers.
On the 17th of February 2018, our episode, The Week That Was, on WBRN Radio in Boston and the Boston Red Network. This is the Boston Red series, 2,676 episodes in a period of 10 years. We roll along now. We are well past 1,000,007 people that have accessed our various programs here on WBRN Radio in Boston and the Boston Red Network. So we are rolling along here, and I'd like to welcome Vicki back to the broadcast family. She's returning. Vicki, from Greece, as she's known, otherwise known as Vicki Vesaris. Hope I pronounced that name. I have to look at it here. But anyway, she is returning, and we'll hear from Nate Silver on the so-called Russian interference, how it affected the election. From Carl Rowe. Carl is always around. Uncle Carl, he's making, as they say, headway here. No doubt about it there. Let's just start here, just very, very briefly here. This is from the New Yorker. Another DJ Trump episode with a Playboy model and a system for concealing infidelity. One woman's account of clandestine meeting, financial transactions, legal pacts designed to hide an extramarital affair by Ronan Farrow, I suppose is how the name is pronounced. Anyway, we'll just briefly start it off here. David Pecker, the chairman of American Media, that is a National Enquirer, and the woman's name is Karen McDougal. McDougal, yeah. A former Playboy of the Year model and Trump and so forth there. This is back, 12 years ago, 2006. Trump taped an episode of The Apprentice at the Playboy Mansion in Los Angeles. That was the late Hugh Hefner's place there, through a pool party for the show contestants with dozens of current and former playmates, including Karen McDougal, a slender brunette who had been named a Playmate of the Year 8 years earlier. That would have been in 2001. The magazine readers voted her runner-up for Playmate of the 90s behind Pamela Anderson. Anyway, He was, of course, married to his current wife for less than 2 years. Doesn't matter, and we won't really continue much of the story. But part of the situation here is Trump and McDougal begin an affair, which McDougal later memorized an 8-page handwritten document provided to the New Yorker by John Crawford, a friend of McDougal. Excuse me. When I showed McDougal the document, she expressed surprise that I have obtained it, but confirmed that the handwriting was her own. What effect do these types of episodes have on DJ Trump? Virtually nothing statistically as far as polling is concerned. And the reason for that is DJ Trump's been involved in so many episodes with Stormy Daniels, etc. This is at the Playboy Mansion, period. So McDougal described her affair as entirely consensual. Well, a consensual affair. Well, so what? I mean, these kinds of things. It's a very long article. We posted it to Facebook and what have you. Will this affect, again, his overall polling? No. How does it affect his core followers? Not at all. As far as people that are opposed to DJ Trump, hate DJ Trump, etc., nothing new. From the White House said that Trump denies having an affair with McDougal. This is an old story that is just more fake news. The president said he never had a relationship with McDougal. And AMI said that an amendment to McDougal's contract signed after Trump won the election allows her to respond to a legitimate, I like the word legitimate, press inquiries regarding the affair. The company said it did not print the story because it didn't find it credible. They lied. 6 former workers there at the National Enquirer told me that Pekka routinely made kill and catch arrangements like the one reached with McDougal. We'd have stories and we bought them knowing full well we'd never going to run them. That's when Jerry George, a former senior editor there, George said that Pekka protected Trump. Pekka really considered him a friend, and George told me we'll never print a word about Trump without his approval. Maxine Page worked there also on and off 2002 to 2012, including as executive editor to one of the company's websites, said that Pekka always used unpublished stories as leverage over some celebrities in order to pressure them to pose for his magazine and feed him stories. Several former workers said these celebrities, including Arnold Schwarzenegger, as reported by the Los Angeles Times, Tiger Woods, who didn't make the cut for one of the tournaments, and Schwarzenegger denied it. You got a lot of denials. This is the old Hollywood merry-go-round situation here. It's basically an MO. Old DJ Trump was a man about town in Los Angeles, New York, or wherever he was. He was out and about. Where the parties were, he was there shortly. So does this make any difference on the election? No, because the Access Hollywood tapes came out and he was labeled a philanderer there. And it's a different country today than, say, with Bill Clinton and the affairs that Bill Clinton had. Bill Clinton had several affairs. It almost collapsed his campaign. This did not happen with DJ Trump. First of all, social media was not there with Bill Clinton in 1991, 1992 to be precise. It was a different atmosphere. The morality of the country was totally different. They wanted change. The people did. So, but again, Bill Clinton barely won the election, if not for a man named Ross Perot out of Dallas, Texas, who incidentally had announced his victory from Dallas, Texas. He didn't like the Bush clan. He was a Texan, and thus he was a third-party candidate, and that's how Bill Clinton came out on top in the first election. The re-election was different. He ran against Bob Dole, and he won in a landslide after literally being impeached. But the likelihood of that happening to DJ Trump is not very good as long as the Republicans hold the House of Representatives. Will not happen. And even if the Republicans were to lose the House of Representatives, an impeachment would probably be rare, because the Democrats, from a strategic standpoint, would see DJ Trump, better to have DJ Trump in office for the next 2 years than have him out of office and have Pence in there. There's a lot of political ramifications that go through something of that nature, and the Democratic Party itself is doing a lot of rebuilding. Enough of that story. Baseball is back, and hopefully this weekend we'll introduce our new program all about sports and baseball spring training, whether it be in Arizona and Florida, is starting out. In fact, we were informed by Major League Baseball. They have a streaming service that is a radio version, and they also have a video version from a lot of the spring training games. They will be broadcasting and will be tuned in to those games. Let's go to Uncle Carl, because you just want to get Uncle Carl out of the way today. Let's see, where is old Uncle Carl? He's somewhere around here. Or he was somewhere around here. And more Facebook news, of course, and we don't want to... Here's Uncle Carl. And we have Nate Silver on the indictment of the Russian organization and some Russian people. We got that up. Here, Uncle Carl is writing on the 15th of February, 2018, in the Wall Street Journal, as he usually does. And at least Congress isn't at fisticuffs, he says. I think American politics is confrontational and ugly today. Here's some context. April 15th is the 220th anniversary of the first brawl in the House. The seeds of the fight was planted weeks earlier when Democratic Representative Matthew Lyon of Vermont questioned the Connecticut delegates' competency, and Federalist Representative Roger Griswold of Connecticut responded by raising Lyon's dishonorable discharge from the Continental Army, and Lyon spit tobacco juice on Griswold, who lunged at Lyons, and other members quickly separated them. Griswold would have his revenge on the 15th of 1798. He hobbled onto the floor on a hickory cane, accompanied by Virginia Federalist Daniel Morgan, a large man and Revolutionary War hero. Griswold approached his Vermont adversary, whose friend has now called him Spitting Lion, began beating Lyon with his cane. Other representatives rushed to stop the assault, but Morgan held them at bay. The fight was one-sided until Lyon maneuvered to a fireplace, grabbed a fire tongue, and began returning blows. Members appealed to the Speaker at the time, Jonathan Dayton, a Federalist, but he was content to watch Griswold make Lyon pay. Colleagues separated the men, but they went at each other again, and before finally being pulled apart. A motion to expel the men failed. 21-73 at the time. Lyon apologized and claimed he didn't know the House was in session when he insulted Griswold. Neither man careers suffered. Griswold served until 1805 and was later Connecticut governor. Lyon won another term in the House from Vermont before moving to Kentucky, where he was elected to Congress 4 times. Tempers have again flared in Congress this year, but so far they are non-reenactment of Lyon's Griswold fracas. members make sure it stays that way by resolving the immigration issue. This may be more plausible than conventional wisdom suggests. Public opinion polls point to acceptable compromises. Take the issue the Dreamers brought to America illegally as children. The 19th of January, Harvard University Harris poll found 77% of the voters, including 66% of the Republicans, believe the Dreamers should be given a pathway to citizenship. Other surveys found similar numbers. President Trump's wall proposal, by contrast, polls very poorly. The Quinnipiac poll, only 37% support building along a wall along the Mexican border, with 59% opposed. But this may reflect the association with Trump. The Harvard-Harris poll found 61% said the current border security is inadequate, and 54% support a combination of physical and electronic barriers. And there's some of the wall already there. Opinions on family unification also depend on how the question is framed. As in all polls, framing is very important. I remember in university taking a course in construction of polls a long time ago, but how it was asked was very, very important. Found that for this Quinnipiac, that 43% of the voters felt immigrants should be allowed to bring only minor children and spouses to the U.S., while 49% said all immediate family members should be eligible. By contrast, 79% told Harvard-Harris that immigration priorities should be based on a person's ability to contribute to America, while 21% said it should be based upon a person having relatives in America. Different descriptions of diversity. Visa lottery also produced significant different responses. In the Quinnipiac poll, 48% people said from countries with low immigration rates should be allowed in the lottery, while 79% said the program should be 37% said the program should be ended. By contrast, Harvard-Harris found 67% opposed the lottery that randomly picks 50,000 people to enter the U.S. each year for greater diversity. Well, that's an interesting thing, this diversity lottery, as they call it, 50,000 people. 50,000 people isn't a lot of people when you think about the process. I don't recall the exact number of people that are placed in this lottery, but the chances of winning it are not that great. So thus they do have the lottery, and that was the reason they had it, to get people in from countries that would have, say, low immigration rates. Other countries have tried these lotteries also. Where immigration goes, well, it's a very interesting point. At one time, and this is through the U.S. history, when the Irish potato famine, etc., the Italians, the Irish people were brought to the U.S. in great numbers, and other people for labor primarily working in the mines and on the farms, etc. Germans were brought in to expand the labor pools. Today it's a bit more complicated because whereas you have labor pools, but the type of labor is becoming more and more technical. And because of the technology that's involved, you have fewer and fewer people. The example was given at the on the lower end at the Trump hotels. They had 125 or so vacancies, and they'd only hired one American-born person. Now, this is where immigration is a very interesting situation, using immigration to hire people that are actually cheaper than native-born people. DJ Trump professes to do this. If he was very serious about it, they would streamline the immigration process, and those temporary workers would not show up. He'd be forced to hire permanent workers at these various places, and they would probably not be seasonal. They would be full-time, or they would be moving from one Trump operation to the next Trump operation. There's ways of doing it. Labor and working conditions is very important in the struggle. Those of us in the struggle, Fight for 15, it's called. That is the salary compensation part of it, but also working conditions, very, very important. And that's something you're going to see more and more of as workers struggle. We had a story from the Public News Service. I guess we'll get it on perhaps on the Monday Morning Quarterback. I have to check. Let's see what the time is. We want to go now to. We probably will have time to get it on later, but we'll first go to Nate Silver, and this is very interesting here. We've been talking about the so-called Russian interference in the election. One of my favorite questions is, did Russian interference cost Hillary Clinton the 2016 election? The question is newly relevant because of Special Prosecutor Mueller's indictment of 13 Russians on Friday on charges that they used various shady techniques to discourage people from voting for Clinton and encourage them to vote for DJ Trump. That doesn't necessarily make it easy to answer, however, but here are my high-level thoughts in the light of the indictment. For more details of these, listen to our Emergency Political podcast. We'll go to it and get a little bit of it in, and then I'll jump back here and see where they are with this podcast on the Russians' indictment and see if we can get it out. Our thoughts on this, it's minuscule, virtually none. And the problem in the interference, in so-called interference in the election, was that you had voter suppression, yes, but primarily the voter suppression came about from the Republican Party and their local units, for example, in Florida, in Pennsylvania, in Wisconsin, that scrubbed the rolls, moved polling places, made it very difficult for people to vote, and on top of that, gerrymandering. So it's a little bit different situation out there. If you didn't have these factors from the Republican Party, it would be different. But since you did, you can't. Let's get this podcast in here, hopefully.
Can we add a disclaimer before the podcast that I am not Galen?
I know so many people on Twitter are really confused.
Welcome to the 538 Politics Podcast, Emergency Podcast, Friday afternoon, Robert Mueller Indictment Edition. We're recording this at around 2 p.m. Eastern, and a little over an hour ago, we got the latest development in the special counsel investigation headed up by Robert Mueller. The latest is an indictment against 13 Russian individuals and 3 businesses, troll farms, essentially alleging that they worked to interfere with the 2016 elections. It's a bit of a reminder that for all the questions about Trump's behavior and collusion, that the goal, the stated goal, the initial goal of the Mueller investigation is to investigate Russian meddling in the 2016 election, and these are the first charges that go right at that. So here to talk about it and discuss about what we learned, what we didn't learn, the chaos and confusion that was 2016 and continues, is our usual crew. Nate Silver. Hello, Nate.
Happy Friday, everyone. Happy News Day. All the news happens on Fridays.
Politics reporter Claire Malone. Hello, Claire.
Hey, Jody.
And politics editor Micah Cohen. Hello, Micah.
Not only does the news always happen on Friday, but people in the office know that I've been going to the dentist more often than I should, and probably the past 4 appointments, every single time I've had to cancel because of huge Trump administration news.
But
Micah's gums are bleeding all over the table.
People is
See, my argument would be that almost any day that you schedule a dentist appointment, there's going to be huge Trump administration news that would cause a politics editor to have to cancel his appointment.
I'm talking big. I'm talking the 4 biggest stories of the past 6 months.
Whenever we have live podcasts, there's always gigantic news.
It was the Manafort indictment. It was today. It was, I think, the travel ban.
Your teeth have a spidey sense.
Well, I made it back to the dentist, yeah.
Well, Listeners, we have more fascinating things to discuss than
one more thing about my teeth.
Nate, so look, we're all processing this. I think we'll say that there's a lot we don't know from this. We're all kind of reading as we go. But Nate, what that is actually in this indictment, as you've been reading it, jumps out at you?
I guess there's information on the scale of the operation that I think was missing before. So this organization, what's it called? It's called like the
Internet Research
LLC.
Agency, LLC.
Internet Research Agency, LLC, a.k.a. Media Synthes, LLC.
It has some aliases.
A.k.a. There's like 8 AKAs.
Mm-hmm.
But so they're talking about an operation that has, I think they described a couple of hundred people, and which has a budget that was about $1.25 million per month. You know, the head count is more impressive than the budget, I guess, in the sense that I guess people in Russia are pretty cheap to employ. But, you know, if you have 300 people or thereabouts kind of working to, often in very clumsy ways, but kind of infiltrate and troll and seed discord and chaos in the U.S. election, that's a bigger scale than, for example, the previous disclosures about ad buys on Facebook, which amounted to, I think, like only $1 million total, which is not really a needle mover. But if you have like 300 people, again, that's a more serious operation than not necessarily people would have predicted, but certainly that had been confirmed before.
Clem?
What stood out to me was certainly what Nate said is the scale of the operation. I was sort of looking for the connections to the Trump campaign, and basically what we have in this indictment is that these people from the Internet Research Agency did contact Trump campaign officials, but in this indictment, there's no word here that they ever responded to these people who are reaching out. Certainly, grassroots activists associated with the Trump campaign responded to these false identities created by this agency, and so that's interesting. You know, it's more of like the nitty gritty and filling in the blanks of what this looked like. But as far as whether or not, you know, I'm sure we'll talk about this again in this podcast. But the collusion thing is what I didn't see anything clearly outlined here that said collusion.
Well, this is a nice reminder, this document, that there's two, maybe more than two tracks in the Mueller investigation, but one is this question of meddling, and then there's the question of the ties to the Trump campaign. Right. But it is this really feels like it sort of is a reminder that the goal of Russian interference was just so chaos. It wasn't necessarily get Hillary not elected or get Trump elected or whatever. There's just a lot of evidence here that it was just cause chaos and confusion, Mike. And I mean, I think the scale of that is kind of one of the more impressive things here, or one of the more kind of stunning things here.
Yeah, the indictment says the stated goal was to not only sow chaos but distrust in American institutions and elections, which I think was successful, and I think we've seen Claire's written about this. But the eroding trust, I think, is a really important part of this, and you can see kind of how that jibes with maybe Russian goals nationally, right? I do think kind of clause 1A of that goal is, it seems pretty clear, to help Trump and hurt Clinton.
Though there is some in here that says, hurting Clinton, maybe even a higher goal. I don't know if we want to go about ranking them, but it's like anti-Clinton, pro-chaos, and then, as a result of that, pro-Trump.
The seeds of this have always sort of been that Putin sort of personally disliked Clinton, and that was...
And thought she would win.
And was basically trying to... I believe, please correct me if I'm wrong, that some of what's contained in this indictment talks about suppressing minority turnout, things like that, just to kind of like ding what might be typically Democratic constituencies. So.
Yeah, there's one of the political advertisements was titled "Hillary Clinton doesn't deserve the black vote."
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So they were trying to.
You're holding the indictment in front of us. In front of you, you were the only one of us to print it out. 37 pages. That's the sound of actual paper. No, but you want to read some of those other some of those other things that are in there. But these are the ads that were run.
You're better at reading stuff.
No, go ahead.
Okay. I say no to Hillary Clinton. I say no to manipulation. Join our hashtag Hillary Clinton for Prison 2016.
I'm getting a little note over the transom here from Galen, who says in the indictment they clearly say that they are supporting Sanders and Trump once they get to 2016, and that prior to 2016 it seems to be more just sort of, it's not clear who they're supporting, it's sort of just the disarray factor.
Yeah, they're supporting, and they're also anti-Ted Cruz and anti-Rubio, but they're explicitly pro-Trump, and it says don't criticize Trump or Bernie. because they're the people that we're trying to help.
They're the more destabilizing candidates, not coincidentally. Here's October 19th, 2016. Quote, Hillary is a Satan and her crimes and lies had proved just how evil she is.
Is a Satan?
Is a Satan. One of many.
And no copy desk here at RussianTrollFarms.com. Should be is Satan, not is a Satan.
That's right.
Thank you for that clarification.
Or satanic.
I think there's some stuff we want to talk about that's maybe not in here, but to just ask the sort of broader question first, and then we'll go back into the actual indictment here. How will this change public opinion regarding the Russian investigation and the questions around both Russian meddling and Trump's ties to Russia?
I don't know. It's a little hard to predict how much staying power that these stories have. I mean, certainly when I was looking today, it was being treated as breaking news on the various networks. I interrupted my schedule of watching curling to watch a little bit of CNN and Fox News.
It's good to be boss.
And we're working away.
We cover sports. We cover sports this site, so it was actually for work. We're starting a curling podcast next week. Look, I think it adds some tangible substance to this investigation, which had kind of gotten caught up. I mean, as you said earlier, Mueller's scope is fairly broad. It includes kind of Russian interference, it includes collusion, and it includes obstruction of justice, right? I think the more kind of actual evidence of Russian interference you have in that broth, that makes it a more potent soup. The ultimate protein would come from collusion, though.
I do still think that it's going to be really hard to prove collusion.
Yeah, so I'm going to frame things a little more boldly than Nate. This fleshes out the story of Russian interference really well. We know the names of the advertisements they were using. We know their budget. We know the names of the companies. We know the departments they had. So in my mind, this will go a long ways towards cementing the fact and the form of Russian interference in 2016, right? The big question then is, how does the American public disentangle Russian interference versus collusion versus effect, and then breaking down collusion? Is it unwitting collusion, which I don't know if that's an oxymoron, or witting collusion?
Yeah,
and here it's all unwitting, right?
And I think that question of collusion or not will become a very partisan thing. So already you've seen sort of Democrats or people who are on the far left will say Russia was interfering with our elections, and that there's an immediate jump to, and the Trump campaign was benefiting from it. Therefore, people in the Trump campaign should be indicted. Well, legally, they're only going to be able to be indicted if there's proof that they knowingly. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but it's proof. Proof that they basically
broke the law.
We're leaving the 538 podcast, but you get the idea of where Silver and company stand here, and we'll go to this. Russian interference is hard to measure because it wasn't a discrete event. This is number one that they listed. The Russians cost Clinton the election. That was the overall question. Then the pointers here, what probably did cost the Clinton the election? The letter that James Comey sent to Congress on the 28th of October, and the subsequent media firestorm over it. The impact is relatively easy to measure because it was the biggest news event in the final 2 weeks of the campaign. Now, what we used to call the October surprise. We could compare public polling conducted before Comey's letter to ones conducted after it. Russian interference isn't like that. By contrast, the indictment and previous reports on the subject suggest that the interference campaign had been on the way for years, since 2014. The magnitude of the interference revealed so far is not trivial, but is still far modest as compared with the operations of the Clinton and Trump operation. The indictment alleged an organization called the Internet Research Agency had a monthly budget of about $1.25 million. That's a paltry sum compared there. The PACs The Clinton campaign and PACs $1.2 billion there, and Trump campaign super PACs spent over $617 million overall. Far less than the Clinton campaign, but they got more a bang for the buck. Hundreds worked, maybe a couple of hundred. These things are always exaggerated. They don't know how many worked for the research, compared with 4,200 paid staffers on the Clinton campaign and 880 on the DJ Trump operation. The Russian per capita GDP is estimated at around, let's see what we got here. Oh, per capita is about $10,000, about 1/6 of the U.S., so 1.2 million monthly budget. Potentially goes a little bit further there, no doubt about it. Got people to work. Cheaper theatrically, the Russian interference tactics were consistent with the reasons the Clinton lost. Well, how did Trump win? Give that he only had a 38% favorability rating amongst people who voted on Election Day. The answer is the Electoral College, no doubt about that. He got the votes in states that he needed to get the votes in. Pennsylvania being an example, and Ohio. Very big states that had to be won. Ohio got out of reach earlier. Pennsylvania was there, and you throw in Wisconsin and Michigan. Now, Wisconsin and Michigan are states that Clinton should have won. She did not win those because her favorables were so low in the first place. And they mentioned also that the African American vote. Well, the African American vote was a vote that people knew about the history of Clinton, not just the history of Wild Bill Clinton and his crime bill, but the history in the 2008 campaign, where the most racist campaign was ran, and also the conduct of the DNC itself, as Donna Brazile pointed out in her book. So there's more out there than you just think about in terms of how racism was used there. Donna Brazile, although she was put in as a temporary chair, was marginalized by Mark and his proteges at the Clinton campaign. The DMC was marginalized in itself. It was in sad shape. There it had been completely run into the ground. And the Clinton people put some cash in there at the last minute, and that's been always a problem with the DNC. President Obama had to rebuild his own virtual DNC because the one that was there was dysfunctional. And thus, because of the dysfunctionality of it, President Obama never spent a lot of time with it. And that is up to the day. We saw today an article out where Representative Keith Ellison of Minnesota is being attacked for his association with the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan of Chicago. They brought that out before, and you can bet that is some of the more conservative elements of the Democratic Party were behind that story, trying to slander Keith Ellison, a progressive there. He ran to be a chair of the party. But now that's very important. Of course, he lost because the party establishment would want anyone other than Keith Ellison. And this brings to question progressives and the Democratic Party. Now, this is not something the Russian research agency is doing. This is something that elements within the Democratic Party are doing. And you have to remember that many of the stories out here, fake news stories, were brought out by party operatives. They've been engaged in it. Ask Uncle Carl Rove. He would tell you that they've been engaged in it for years. But this whole idea around the Russian thing goes back to a Cold War thing, situation where the Soviet Union was the enemy. But today it doesn't strike as much currency as it once did. Now, with some people, it does. But the Bernie deal there was not that they were needed to promote Bernie up, because the Clinton machine was promoting Bernie down. And they used disenfranchisement tactics and outright stealing in Nevada and other places from Bernie. Therefore, the contest that he could have won, he did not win. And in places like New York, where they had only that members of the party could vote and not independents or other people, because a lot of Bernie's people were not registered Democrats like myself. Therefore, in New York, we had not been able to vote. So, in other words, those kinds of things made much of the difference. And you have to remember, in Wisconsin, in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, gerrymandering was there. And not only gerrymandering, but suppression of the vote. People were thrown off the voting rolls and cleansed. Same thing happened in Ohio. All those states that the Republicans had the party machinery and the legislative machinery, that depressed the total vote much, much more than anything this Russian operation could have done, period. Now, as far as them conducting the operation using virtual private networks, but a lot of groups use that. And if they were digging deeper, they would find that groups inspired by the Koch brothers, etc., were using some of the same tactics, and then throwing back what we call the flippable in the political consulting business, that it was fake news, this whole idea of fake news. Well, there's a lot of fake events. I was looking at even the ESPN page. They have sponsored links. Those sponsored links are nothing but fake news, literally put on the Nate Silver 30, what is it called? I always get this wrong here. The 538 here, if you look at that, you'll get down here, sponsored headlines. Here are the most liberal and least liberal cities. Luxury as standard in all 2018 crossover SUVs. Usually it's much more than this. It's where you can gain whatever. Anyway, let's do the sports. Not a lot of sports here. This is the NBA weekend, so we had the World versus Team USA. World won at 155 to 124. The Kings of the World and the rest of the rising stars there. For the Olympics in Korea, the medal count here, let's see, is 21 for Norway, 16 for Germany, and 15 for Canada. Germany has 9 gold, Norway has 8 gold, and Norway has 8 silver, sorry about that, and 7 bronze there also, So we started looking at the accounts here. Norway 7, the Netherlands 6 here. Just keeping track here. It's kind of a little bit of a problem here getting the count as it should be. This is countries. Oh, I see. Okay, this is countries. So anyway, we got more or less the count here, but the Norwegians are ahead than Germany. Then Canada in the total counts. In goal, you have Germany ahead, Norway, and Germany is ahead in gold, and Norway is ahead in silver. Yeah, and then we have bronze. So. See if we can get the full tracker here. Germany, Canada, Norway, Netherlands had 6. Canada, Netherlands. This is silver. 5 and 5, and Norway and Canada. Norway has 6. Canada has 5. We'll get it right in a minute here. And by total by countries. Norway has 7 golds, 8 silvers, and 4 bronze, a total of 21. Germany has a total of 16. 9 of those will be gold medals. Canada has 5 gold medals, a total of 15 overall. And the Netherlands has 6 golds and a total of 13. Team USA has 5 golds, 2 silvers, and 2 bronze, a total of 9. Austria, 3 golds, 2 silvers, and 2 bronze, a total of 9 there. Japan, 1 gold, 5 silvers, and 3 bronze. And Sweden, 4 golds, 3 silver, no bronze, 7 there. France, 3 golds. Italy, 2 golds. Korea, 3 golds, and 2 silvers, total of 5 there. China, we haven't mentioned them in here, no golds, but 4 silvers and 1 bronze. And let's see, Spain, 2 bronze medals at Kazakhstan, 1. And Finland, 3 bronze medals for their total. Czechoslovakia, 1 gold. They used to do really well, and 2 silvers and 2 bronze, a total of 5. We already did Korea, we did France, Sweden, and let's see. One has been eluding us all day here. With some of these countries. I see. Okay. And still eluding us. Anyway, we'll leave this behind. A college of basketball, Rhode Island and St. Bonaventure. Get it right, man. Anyway, so St. Bonaventure, 77-74 over Rhode Island. Rhode Island's ranked 16th. That was the only thing here, and we have the National Hockey League, and we had the Flyers and Blue Jackets. Flyers 2-1 over the Blue Jackets in overtime. The Islanders and Hurricanes. The Islanders shut out the Hurricane of Carolina. The Avalanche and Jets. Jets 6-1 over the Avalanche, and the Blues and Stars in Dallas. Stars 2-1 in that contest. And spring training is opening up. As I said before, looking at the Cubs here, Mike Montgomery will lose his rotation, perhaps, to Mr. Darvish, who is now with the Cubs. And it looks like the rotation here will include John Lester. He's back. Kyle Hendricks, Jose Quintana, and Tyler Chatwood, and now Darvish. So some new ones are getting in the rotation there with the Cubbies. Different kind of team there. I noticed on that rotation. Wait a minute here. Is there any people of color on it at all? Just Jose Quintana. And that is it with the Cubs out here, just looking at some of the, and we'll be looking at those things, how people of color play in, particularly there. Jose Quintana, yeah, he's obviously, he is from Colombia, 6'1", 220 pounds. He's an African from Colombia. So, again, interesting there being the rotation, how the rotation differed from the days of Mickey Mantle and company. We'll be looking at some of that. The thing is, with All About Sports, it obviously takes a time to produce type of events. Hopefully we can get that out this weekend, at least talk about the baseball season coming up. An enormous amount of research, and Mr. Quintana is 29 years old, born in 1989. He's been in the leagues for 5 years. So, again, we'll start talking about some of this. We'll use ESPN, the sporting news used to be literally the basic book for Major League Baseball. Not so much now. It's out of St. Louis, or at least it used to be. It was bought out by some people. We all used to read the sporting news. But anyway, we'll put it in our broadcast. This will do it for us. We'll see you on the Monday morning, the quarterback on WRN Radio and the Boston Red Network. Also, we have Numbers Man and Open Source Reports, so we're busy. We put a lot of productions on the weekend. We'd like to sort of round them out, but sometimes that happens, and of course we have some coursework to do. So we are busy, as they say here. No traveling on this weekend, so that we won't have to do. So things will sort of work out here. We'll start this off with the baseball player Rizzo speaking on the affair, the shooting in Florida. It's about 2 minutes. We'll start with that. So we have a well-rounded cast, and as usual, we start with the late Floridian there, Stetson Kennedy, and his work on the anti-racist campaign. Good day, and have a good weekend, everyone.